All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you are on a larger screen like a desktop. Looks like we already got some questions in there, so we'll go ahead and get started. Got quite a few. Awesome. All right, so Tom K says it's easy to release too early in the impact area. Is there a variability practice for the opposite, releasing too late? Yeah, so once you get to where you're actually able to release it where you want it to, um, basically by working through the straight line release course. Within the straight line release course, we talk about taking swings where you release it. Basically, you feel like there's no release, then you feel like you release it too early, then you do one in between. That's basically what you're doing there. So it'd be almost be like hitting high low shots, high low medium trajectory. That's essentially what it would be. So that's what you can do is you can go out and just hit high, low, and medium trajectory shots. That's your release pattern is going to change with those. So I try to hit one as low as you possibly can, releasing it as late as possible. But I would only really work on that if you are getting it to release where you want it to. If you're someone who's already who can't get the club to release out in front enough, then it's not really doing you any good to because you're just practicing to release the way that you normally are, right? Just getting better at releasing the way that you are now. But if you want to change your release to a later release, you need to work up to that point, and then you would do variability for too much and too little release, right? So that's what I would do. So we talk about that in the straight line release course. So it'd basically just be hitting high and low shots, and then medium trajectory shots would be kind of like where you'd want to be. So Tom K goes on to say, how does Tiger hit a low stinger? Does part of this involve holding off the release? To a certain extent, yeah. So basically, what he's doing, he does a couple things to basically to hit a low stinger. We need to de-loft it as much as possible. We need to get the ball going. The number one thing that makes the ball launch lower is the loft of the club at impact, otherwise known as dynamic loft. So what we'll do is one, we'll take a little bit of a narrower stance. If I take a little bit of a narrower stance, it's easier for me to get my body forward and to get my hands more in front of the golf ball. So if this is kind of my normal stance, I'll actually get my stance a little bit narrower, and I'll actually I'll kind of favor my lead side to help me to get my body more forward. That's going to help me, one, to get my hands more in front. And that's also going to help me to hit more down on the ball a little bit, which is also going to drive down the launch a little bit, right? But the main thing is getting my hands more in front. Keep in mind that the stinger is not the most powerful shot. It's just a shot that helps you to. It's hitting it lower, right? So you're generally not going to hit it as far as a normal shot, but you're going to get run out, right? So it can be really good to use. Basically, Tiger always uses it as like a fairway finder, right? If he was on a hole and he just needed to get in the fairway, he can control it really well. So he'd just get the ball on the ground and rolling. And if you're playing in conditions where it's firm and fast, like a lot of PGA Tour stops, you can hit a stinger crazy distances when you do that because it's just, a lot of the stingers they hit probably only carried, 180, 200 yards, but they would roll out 80, 100 yards, you know what I mean? So if you're playing in conditions that don't really allow that, then I wouldn't expect to get as much distance like Tiger would. Also, if you don't have the club head speed that Tiger Wood does, then, really it's the stinger is more for people who have a lot of club head speed because you have to have club head speed to be able to support the amount of shaft lean that you get with a stinger to be able to hit it any kind of distance. If you already struggle with speed, honestly, the stinger, you're already hitting it low. You're already not hitting it as high high enough that the wind would even be a big deal. But if you have enough club head speed, then the stinger can be a good shot. So anyway, to get back into it again, I got my body forward a little bit narrower stance. I'm also going to play the ball a little bit back in my stance, and because of that, I'm typically going to open up my body a little bit to that. That does a couple things. One, that neutralizes my club path, right? So if I put the ball back in my stance, generally, imagine if I put it way back here, my club path is going to typically be more from the inside. So to compensate for that, I'll just open up my body a little bit. What that also does is that allows me it makes it easier to open up my body and get my hands more in front. So setup wise, I'm going to be a little bit narrower with my stance. I'm going to have the ball a little bit more back in my stance. I'm going to be a little bit more open with my feet. I'm going to kind of favor my lead side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stay on my lead side. I'm going to really try to drive my body forward and my hands forward to get that really, really low, get that hands really in front and get that really, really low kind of shot. That's really how they're hitting the stinger, right? So hopefully that makes sense. But this really isn't a shot that you would want to hit like is your normal kind of shot, but that can be helpful to hit kind of a stinger kind of shot. All right, so Norman S says, I am a 19 handicap. My sand wedge, 60 degrees, a bounce of 8. Should I be using a wedge with a higher bounce? Thoughts for more success out of greenside bunkers? I mean, there's no way for me to really know. The amount of bounce that you need to have is really dependent on how you hit the ball, your skill level, a lot of things. And I know you're a 19 handicap. You probably benefit from more bounce. Generally, I would say most people are going to benefit from more bounce because the bounce is more like a safety net. It gives you more margin for error. The bounce is what keeps the club from digging so much. Wedges, this isn't even like this is probably like a 50-degree wedge, but a 60-degree wedge is going to have a sharper leading edge on it, which is going to tend to want to dig more. If you play in conditions that are very firm and tight, if that's what you play on most of the time, then you can get away with a lower bounce kind of wedge, right? An eight bounce may be a good way because really firm and tight turf, right? The club's just not going to dig as much. But if you play in really soft, plush, maybe even sometimes wet conditions, you're going to generally benefit more from a higher bounce kind of club. You may have seen we did some videos or a video. I can't remember how many we've released or whatever on the C3I wedge. The C3I wedge is kind of an extreme bounce kind of wedge. And I mean, I played around with it and I've thought about putting it in the bag because it's just so easy to hit. It's hard to hit a bad shot. Now you can absolutely chunk it and hit bad shots with it, but your worst shots with it are typically not that bad. But your worst shot with like a 60-degree wedge is going to be like a chunk where the ball just dribbles, right? And it's just hard to do that with a C3I wedge because as long as you just hit the ground, as long as you just focus on hitting the ground, you'll hit something somewhat decent. So I think honestly, most players, average golfer to, or more, which if you're in 19 handicap, that's, average golfer to a little bit higher handicap golfer. I think most of those golfers are going to generally benefit from a wedge like that because it's just so much easier to hit. And then as you get better and get more skillful with the wedges, but you might be a 19 handicap that's really, really good with your wedges, and that may not be the best club for you. And maybe you just struggle off the tee or something like that. So there's lots of ways to be a 19 handicap. It could be, it's usually not 19 handicaps always struggle with the same things. It's, there's lots of things going on there. So unfortunately, there's no way for me to know exactly what wedge you can use. I would recommend getting fitted. Now, I don't think you're going to get fitted for a C3I wedge. I don't think, places are trying to sell you wedges like that. But, and to be honest with you, the C3I, I was a skeptic too. It's like, okay, this is like an infomercial kind of wedge. It looks crazy. No tour players are using it. No tour players are using it because they're very highly skilled with wedges, right? And they're playing tight and firm conditions where that wedge may not be the best fit for those kind of conditions. But I think for the average golfer to even a 10 handicap or better golfer, depending on what their struggles are, you struggle with the wedge, you struggle with chunking, thinning wedges, the C3I wedges, it's just easier. And it may be something that you not use forever, but it may be something that you use for now to get better with your wedges. And then once you get good at that, maybe you can graduate to a higher level wedge. So I would recommend the C3I wedge. If you really struggle with the wedges, I imagine that you do struggle since you're asking the question, unless you're just curious about what bounce you should be using. But I would generally say more people are going to benefit from more bounce because it's just easier. But a lot of it, there's a lot of things that it can depend on. All right, so Norman S says from 70 to 75 yards using a full 60-degree wedge shot, I can get within from 70 to 75 yards using a full 60-degree wedge shot. I can get within 12 to 20 feet diameter of the hole. That's pretty good. Awesome. Should I continue using that club, or should I bump and run a 7-iron or 8-iron if I have a good lie? Well, my question would be, are you doing that all the time? If that's something that you can trust and it's reliable, no reason to really change it. So if you have the confidence every time you're 70, 75 yards out to hit a 60-degree and get it within 12, 20, I mean, that's pretty good, to be honest. If that's like your average, then I would keep doing that. I wouldn't just change it. But if you're chunking and thinning that shot, that's like a 1 in 10, or even like a half the time you're doing that, and the other half the time you're chunking and thinning it and you're nowhere near the green, then in that case, I'd maybe you're probably making things a little bit harder on yourself than they have to be, right? So hitting a 60-degree from that distance just isn't necessary. But if it works for you, then go ahead and do it if it's something that's reliable. But if it's not, then I'd maybe consider taking not necessarily like a 7 or an 8-iron from that distance, because that's going to come out really low and hot. But just taking a little less loft. So maybe something like an approach wedge from that distance. So something in the 50, maybe even a pitching wedge. You can get some pretty good air on a pitching wedge from 70 to 75 yards. So those would all be things that I would consider. 7, 8-iron might be that would be very very low. But hey, and that's not to say that you can't use a 7 or an 8-iron. If that's something you get really good at, then do that. It's just a matter of what you're good at. So Norman had another question. Says, I have always lined up my driver just inside my heel, but after experimenting with lining my driver an additional 3 to 4 inches farther from my left heel, I'm making better contact with the ball and hitting the ball farther. What is the reason for this? No way for me to know without seeing your swing or seeing what was happening. But I would just keep doing what you're doing because it sounds like it's working. And the other thing to keep in mind is that you may have felt like you were playing the ball 3 or 4 or off the inside of your heel, but you may not have actually been doing that. And maybe moving the ball 3 to 4 inches, maybe that actually put it where it needs to be. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, I don't know why you're hitting the ball better. It's hard to say without actually seeing side by side, knowing for sure. But yeah, if you're hitting the ball better, I would just keep doing what you're doing. All right, so let's keep going. So Glenn B says, if you're using the PRGR launch monitor that you recommend, will there be a difference in the estimated flight distance using regular game balls versus range balls? Yeah, typically, depending on the range balls. So what we have to understand is what this device is actually doing, right? So it's measuring your club head speed, which shouldn't be any different hitting off the course and on the range. Now, if you hit indoors, sometimes your club head speed will go down just because of a subconscious thing. Being indoors, it may not necessarily be something you're trying to do. It's just that sometimes when we're kind of boxed in, we don't swing as freely as we have. If I were to take a full swing in here, because this is like a 10 by 10 room, I'm very, very close to hitting a wall, right? I'm probably not going to swing as fast as I would if I was just in open air outside. So, but all things equal, generally you're going to hit you're going to swing just as fast, in open air on the range as you would on the course. Now the ball speed can change, right? Because the ball speed is how fast the ball's coming off of the face, right? So a lot of times range balls won't have as much ball speed because the range balls. Now, not all range balls are created equal. You're going to have some driving ranges that have limited flight golf balls that will literally be, 70% of what what it would normally be. I would say most ranges that I go to, and it may be different in your area, but most ranges that I go to are going to have range balls that are just not as good a quality as a normal ball. So it's usually like 5 to 10% different. Generally, I can get about the best I can do with our range balls. at the course, where we shoot videos at sometimes, is about 1.45. Usually not able to get a 1.5 just because of the golf balls. Now, you may get a golf ball that's been hit so many times and it's just a dud of a golf ball too. So keep that in mind. Generally, the ball speed isn't going to be as high, and then subsequently the estimated distance won't be as high because of that as well. Now, keep in mind that distance, it's not measuring the distance. It's taking the information that you've given it by telling it the club that you're hitting, and then it measures the club head speed and the ball speed, and then it has an algorithm, an equation within it that it plugs those numbers into, and then it gives you an estimated distance based on that. So, we have found that on well-struck shots, it's pretty accurate. It's within 5 or 10 yards, which is pretty amazing for a device like that. But if you hit a shot way off the toe, you top it or something like that, obviously it's probably not going to be right. So keep that in mind. If you're not hitting it solid, it's probably not going to give you correct estimated distances. It's not that it's inaccurate. It's just that it's not able to give you the estimated distance based on the information that it's being given, right? So keep that in mind. But yeah, generally it is going to go, it is going to go a little bit shorter with the range balls. All right, let's keep going. So Gordon says, Q, having trouble staying in posture and downswing. Looking at video, I can't seem to maintain my forward tilt and head is backing away from the position. My irons are really solid, but having a hard time with rotation and posture with driver help. So it's hard for me to know for sure without seeing your swing why this is happening. But the most common thing that I see is that we're coming down steep with an open face, and you standing up out of your posture is installing your rotation is a way to shallow out the club and get the face squared up. It's your solution to making that happen. So let me explain, right? If I'm coming down steep, what that means is that this club is more in a vertical fashion, right? So you can think of it as being off plane. The club is coming down with, if I were to continue from here, right? If I was here and I were to continue to rotate my body, let's say my lower body my hips worked like a tour player, but the club's in this position, right? Well, my club would come down and cut across the ball relative to my target, right? Well, your brain knows that's bad, right? So what you'll do is you'll get here and then you'll stand up. Well, look what happens if I'm steep and then my hips go forward. And when my hips go forward, I don't rotate. Well, now that club's shallowed out, I can swing from the inside and I can hit a functional golf shot, right? Now, it's not going to be very consistent because it's hard to control that, right? But you can still hit consistent. You can still hit functional golf shots. I would much rather, like if I was picking teams for a golf team, right? And I had the choice between the guy that moved his hips really well, but was coming down steep and cut across it, and the guy that was coming down steep and stood up out of it, right? I'd much rather have the guy that stands up out of it because that guy can actually hit functional golf shots, whereas the other one is not going to be able to hit very good golf shots. They're going to hit pulls, hooks, slices. They're going to have a hard time even making good contact with the ball. So that's more than likely what's going on is you're just coming down steep. The other thing is just the face is very open. So some people, there's maybe staying in their posture initially, but they come down and this face is very open. So we kind of get the face pointing up to the sky a little bit. Well, if you were to rotate through the shot, right? If you were to rotate and have the hands in front, well, the face would just stay open and you hit it a mile to the right. So what we do is we'll feel that face opening up. So we'll stand up. And if I stand up out of my posture, now I can release that club earlier and I can square up the face. If I release the club early, that's a mechanism to closing the club face, right? That helps me to get the club face more closed. So that could be part of it as well. So if you're struggling with staying in your posture, what I recommend doing is working through our 20-minute shallowing face course, because that helps you to get the club shallowing out, and that helps you to get the face squaring earlier in the swing. So that way you don't have to come up with a different solution, right? A less efficient solution to get those things to work together. So that's what I'd recommend doing, Gordon, is working through the 20-minute shallowing fix course. Outside of that, I'd maybe recommend doing some online swing reviews with one of the instructors, maybe myself, right? I'd love to have the opportunity to work with you on this stuff. So so that way we can dig down and know specifically what is the problem. But without seeing your swing, all I can really tell you is the most common thing that I see, which is standing up and trying to flip the face closed. All right. And that's the 20-minute shallowing fix. So if you want to check out that course, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix. If you'd like to do the online lessons and just figure it out right away, and get a plan, and the plan may be just to work on the 20-minute shallowing fix. But if we want to know what it is for sure, if you should see a link at the top of the screen there above the video where you can sign up for my swing reviews. If there's no spots available, just join the waiting list so that way you can get notified whenever spots open up in the future. Gordon went on to say, last thought, having a hard time finding the ball for solid contact with driver. For so many years, I was arm swinger, no rotation, tough transition. Yeah. So, yeah, if you're standing up out of it, and especially, because you just don't know where the club is, it's just hard to control. So, yeah, you're probably coming down steep and having to stand up out of it. Yeah, but if we can get the club shallowed out and get that face square earlier, well, now I know I'm going to know where it is, right? I'm going to be able to stay in my posture and turn through it and be able to control it a lot more. So my guess is the 20-minute shallowing fix is what you need to work on. And this is all clubs, right? There's some people that shallow out their irons really well, and then for some reason they come down really steep with the driver. A lot of times the reason is because with the driver, the ball position is more forward, or because we're just trying to hit that driver harder, right? So we swing more upper body, and that can make us come down steep and have those issues. So that's what I would be looking at. If you struggle with shallowing with the driver, work through the course with your driver. The same thing applies. So just do the same thing with your driver. All right, so let's keep going. So Dan S says, using the search engine can find very little on shooting a fade. Obviously, draw information is all over the place. Looking for draw with mid irons. Found one video on power draw with driver. Can you help? Oh, you're looking for fade? Yeah, just search fade on the website. I mean, there's videos. Maybe, unless they've been taken down. Let me double check. So for those of you who aren't familiar, there is a search engine on the website. If you're using the normal mobile site, or the normal website, like if you were on a computer, it's when you open the page, it's just there, like in the upper right hand side. So I'll just search fade, and let's see what I come up with. Yeah, so first video, how to draw and fade your shots. So we go over draw and fade in there. The second video is hit more fairways with power fade. The next video, that's a ball striking masterclass. So unless you have access to that, you won't be able to look at that. So yeah, those next two videos are ball striking masterclass. And then ball position tips for fade and draw. That would be one. There's another power fade and power draw video. Here's another power fade video. So yeah, there's lots of videos for hitting a fade. So I would just search the word fade. Maybe fades didn't maybe if you had an S on it, it didn't give you very much. If you went fades plural. Yeah, I'm guessing you probably searched fades and didn't get very much. I see one here at the bottom of the list here. So just search the word fade and you'll find lots of videos there. So check those out. And if you're on the mobile site and you're trying to find the search engine, it's still there. You just kind of have to dig to get to it. So if you click the icon in the upper right hand corner, that will expand a menu. And if you scroll down the bottom of that menu, you'll find the search box. Unless they've changed the website. That's what it was last time I was on there. All right, so let's keep going. So Mark P says, I've been doing the drill where you close the club face down at address around 20 or 30 degrees, and then truly try to keep your hands forward, which squares up the club face. Can you actually play golf this way? Because I'm hitting some good shots doing that. there's no rules as to how you hit the golf ball. So yeah, you can absolutely do that. That's 100% fine. Just to tell you a little bit of story, Tommy Fleetwood, when he was younger, he struggled to get the ball low, to really compress it and get shaft lean. So his instructor they worked with had him work on just hitting all these punch shots. And he got so good at it that he just made that a part of his swing. So that's why Tommy Fleetwood kind of has with his irons, he kind of has that abbreviated finish, that what we call the umbrella finish, where he's kind of like this, right? It's because it's kind of a punch shot finish. So that's just how he hits all his iron shots, because he did drill and he just hit the ball awesome doing that, and that just became his iron swing. So yeah, I mean, if that helps you hit the golf ball a lot better, then do that. That's 100% fine. There's no rule that you have to set up with the face square or anything like that. So Steve P says, I get good contact on my irons, but I frequently hook them. So I usually have to misalign to compensate. Your thoughts? Face is just too close. So I would look at what's actually closing your face too much, and then work on getting those things, undoing those things. So too strong of a grip. So if my grip is too strong, that can certainly get the face too close. So maybe try weakening the grip a little bit. That can help. Another thing could be that your wrist angles are too strong, right? So I'm bowing my wrist too much or extending back. If I'm going like this too much, I can get the face too close. So maybe try to go more toward a flat wrist instead of a bowed wrist, if that's something that's happening. Another thing would be a release that's just way too early, kind of hanging back and throwing the hands early, right? That gets the face too close. So really trying to feel like your hands are much more in front, pushing that face open. That could be what's going on there. So those would be the things that I'd be looking at. Hard for me to know without seeing your swing, but those would be the things I'd be looking at for sure. So Tom C says, here are my average distances for each club. Driver 252, 3-way. Okay, so blah 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 blah. I was wondering why there is such a wider spread among my short irons. Should my goal be to have 10-yard separation between each club? Not necessarily, but I would guess that you have a bigger gap between your shorter irons because you have an earlier release. The earlier you release the club, the bigger gap you're going to have with the shorter irons, because you're just kind of hitting them sky high with a lot of spin. So yeah, I would venture to say you're probably just early releasing the club too much, but hard to say without seeing your swing or anything like that. So I'd maybe work on trying to compress those lower irons a little bit more, getting the hands more ahead at impact, really just working through the top speed golf system and getting that club to release more out front. So Rick M says, hi Q, when talking about compression and impact, should I have the intent to squash the ball against the turf? That can be a good feel to have, especially if you're someone who struggles with just not hitting the turf at all, because hitting down on the ball a little bit. But what we have to understand is what exactly is compression, right? The way that I would define compression would be basically making that ball smash on the face, like pancake on the face. That's essentially what compression is, right? So I'm not necessarily going to compress the ball more by hitting down on it. We do want to hit down on it a little bit, right? But if we just hit down on it a ton, then with loft, right? So if we're kind of going like that, that's more of a glancing blow. So part of what compresses the ball would be, one, making ball first contact. We have to hit down on it a little bit to make that happen, right? So kind of feel like you're squashing the ball into the turf might be a good feeling for someone who just kind of picks the ball off the turf, because that can help you to hit to make more ball first contact, right? So that's first and foremost for shots off the turf. To compress them, we got to make ball first contact. If we're hitting the ground before the golf ball too much, we're not going to compress the ball very much, right? The next piece would be where you're hitting it on the club face. If I'm hitting it on the toe, hitting it on the heel, I'm not transferring as much energy to the golf ball, so it's not going to compress or smash pancake on the face as much, right? Same thing goes if I hit it very thin or if I hit it on the top of the face. Now you can get away with hitting it thin a lot of times because when you hit it thin, it will actually twist the face down a little bit, which de-lofts it, which can kind of cancel it out a little bit. But it can also make it spin a little bit more. So depending on the club, generally longer clubs that you hit thin, you won't go very far. But if you hit like a pitching wedge thin, it typically won't hurt you as bad because, those shots are going to be spinning anyway. So but if you hit a little bit high on the face, sometimes that can actually make the ball go farther. But if you hit too high on the face, it will actually, it'll kill it. So where you strike it on the face is definitely a big part of it. The speed that you hit it at. We can't squash a ball without speed, right? So speed would be a part of it. If you're cutting across it, right? So if I'm coming down steep with an open face and I cut across it, right? That's not going to compress the ball as much, right? So if you have a ton of curve on your shots, you're not compressing the ball as much as you should. If you're hitting too far down on it with loft, that gives you too much spin. This is usually more of an issue with the driver where people are hitting down on it with loft. Not as much with the irons. But yeah, I think swatching the ball down in the turf can be helpful. Feel it's not technically what you want to do. Like I wouldn't actually want to hit a golf ball. I wouldn't want to hit a ball like that I'm smashing into the turf. But that could be a great feel for someone who's kind of picking the ball up, right? To get the feeling of kind of hitting down and through the turf, making ball first contact, that can definitely be a good feel. But we have to understand what exactly compresses the golf ball. Ball first contact, center face contact, speed, and then direct hit, right? Where we don't want to cut across the ball. So we want our face and our path. We want our face to be square. We want our path to be relatively square. We want to de-loft the club, and we don't want to hit it with a bunch of loft and down. We want to de-loft it with more of a straight into the golf ball, right? So that's why we want to hit up on the driver, right? Because hit up on the driver with less loft, that's going to reduce your spin, and that's going to help you to help the ball to go farther. Obviously, you can overdo that, but that's typically hard to do. All right, so let's keep going. Gordon says, thank you, no problem. So FK says, to come from the inside, I have to drop my right shoulder at the start of the downswing. Should I continue to do that, or does that lead to problems later on the swing? Yeah, we don't really want to go to the top of the swing and then go like this. You're going to tend to hit the ground way behind the golf ball. Now, it may be a feel that you're having, but if you're hitting a lot of chunk and thin or topped shots, then you're probably dropping your right shoulder too much, and that's going to lead to those issues, right? But if you're someone, because golf, a lot of what golf is adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want, right? So you may feel like you're dropping your shoulder, but you may actually be just moving your shoulder in the right place, because what you may have been doing before is this. So you feeling like this may actually be putting your shoulder in a good position. So I would stay with that feel as long as you are not chunking and topping the ball and hitting all your shots thin, because typically if you drop that right shoulder, that's what's going to happen. Now, if that is what's happening, we want to make sure that we're shallowing out the club with our arms, right? That's really the main thing that shallows out the club. So one's going to be our forearm rotation, right? So you can think of that as turning a doorknob to the right for a right-handed golfer. So if I have it like this, I keep my elbows to my side. You can see how my forearm rotation, that shallows out the club. So that's this, right? And then the other thing is in our shoulder joints. That's what moves the elbows, right? So I want my elbows to go like this. So I want my elbows to kind of point out toward the golf ball. This is what we talk about in the 20-minute shallowing fix, where we talk about leading with the elbows, chopping down a tree. That's my trail shoulder externally rotating. You can think of that as losing an arm wrestling contest. And then in my lead shoulder, it's going to be turning out. It's internally rotating. So you can see how that shallows out the club. So that would be what you might be doing is this, right? That shallows out the club, but that's not the way you want to do it, because then I'm going to hit the ground back here. What I want to do is I want to keep my shoulders more on a good plane, but then I want to shallow out the club by rotating my arms. And now you can see that helps me to get my ground contact to be here, right? But I'm still getting that club to shallow out from the inside. So, but like I said, I would look on video to see what's going on there, because you may be doing the fault feel real approach. This is what we want to do, which the fault would be that your shoulder may have been coming over the top. The feel may need to be that the shoulder dips under, but the reality is that the shoulder just works more on a better plane in the downswing. So, so yeah, that's what I'd be maybe making sure that you're doing. All right, let's keep going. So Colby B says, my misses have been pushes or hooks. I've been working on the open stance, which has really helped my ball striking. I have decreased the range of misses by half or more. Thus far, it just feels right. Anything to look out for? So if you're struggling with that two-way miss where it's a push or a hook, you're just having trouble controlling the face. So my guess is that the face is kind of open, and then you're having to make a quick compensation late in the swing when things are moving very fast to get the club face very closed, or to get the club face closed. And sometimes you underdo it and sometimes you overdo it, right? So for example, let's say I got this club nicely shallowed out, but I've got this face very open here. Well, I can either continue to turn through the ball, and then my face is open at impact, and my path is from the inside with my face open, so that's going to lead to a push. Or I sense that, right, and then I flip my hands to square up the face, and now the face gets too closed, and it goes to the left. So I'd work on getting this face in a better position coming down, so you don't have to make that quick compensation at the end, and you can control the face a lot more easily. So that can be done with the grip, getting a stronger grip, or that can be done with the wrist angles, getting these wrist angles to bow, getting that lead wrist to bow, the trail wrist to extend more as you're coming down. So I play around with those to get the face in a better position. So that way you can be here and you can just keep turning through the shot, and you can have the face square all the way through the ball. And then you don't have that big variable of the two-way miss there that you're talking about. So Tony D says, I use graphite shafts on my irons and am thinking about switching to steel for various reasons. However, I've heard that graphite is easier on the body. I get golf elbows sometimes. Have you ever heard this? I know you can't advise on medical matters, but just want to know if you've ever heard this. Thanks. I guess I haven't really heard that, but I can see how it could be. So graphite shafts are usually lighter. That's kind of the whole idea of using graphite shafts, is that they can make them very light. And that ultimately can be easier on the body, swinging something, imagine swinging, an alignment stick versus like a lead pipe, right? You're probably going to get more sore and be more injury prone swinging a lead pipe than you are an alignment stick, which would be very light, right? So that's where I could see, steel shaft making you maybe a little bit more injury prone, because it would be a heavier implement. So, but graphite shafts are typically lighter. The knock on graphite shafts before is that they used to be not the most consistent, and they used to not be able to make them as stiff as a steel shaft, but the technology has come a long way. And also the durability, you're more likely to break a graphite shaft than you are a steel shaft. So, but also, those things, you kind of have to just figure out what works best for you. So if you want to know what works best for you, I recommend working with a professional to get professionally fitted to find what works best for you. And, if you bring up to, if your fitter says, hey, I think you should have steel shafts, and then you ask them this question, they would give you a much, they probably have a much better idea of how shafts take a toll on the body. Club fitting is not really my expertise, so I do know a little bit about it, but I don't know as much as a guy that just does it all day, every day for a living, right? I don't fit people for clubs. I just have a fairly novice understanding of it. So, but I could see how basically if it you may get more golfer's elbow, but you also have to look at why you're getting golfer's elbow. Typically, people get golfer's elbow, tendonitis in the elbow, It's from, tendonitis is just from overuse, right? Overdoing it, hitting too many shots and throwing with the arm too much, right? So, um, or maybe the arms isn't, the tendons aren't built up to be able to handle the amount, the amount of load that you're putting onto it. A lot of times this happens with people that are that maybe didn't golf a lot, but then all of a sudden started playing golf a ton and they're hitting a lot of shots or practicing a lot more. A lot of times people will get golfer's elbow because their elbow is just not used to doing that. Part of it could be technique. If you're really slamming the club, if you're practicing off of a mat and you're really slamming a club into a mat over and over and over again, that can definitely put a toll on your elbow, regardless of what, whether you have graphite or steel shaft. So all things to consider, but I would say the only reason why graphite would be easier on your body would be because it would be lighter. Not necessarily the best thing though, right? So you have just something you have to figure out through a fitting for the most part. So Colby B says so I think it may have cut him off. So Colby, if you got your question, go ahead and put it in there, finish it in there. Just make sure to not press enter until you're done typing it. So that way it puts it all in there. So Jimbo says, despite shoveling the club out, moving arms way too fast, how do I stop that? I'd need to see your swing for sure. Typically what people are doing is they're reacting to the club face or the club position, right? So if we don't have the club face in a good position or the shaft in a good position at the top, you may be making compensations in the downswing to be able to hit a functional shot, right? So let's say that I have the club, I have a very short swing, but then I'm really across the line, right? Well, I have to kind of throw with my arms very early to get the club anywhere near where it needs to be. If I were to kind of slowly start with my body, I would get here, the club would still be not in a good position. There's just no way I can hit a good shot from here. So what I would do is I would get here and then I would throw my hands out in front and start with my hands and get that club to work out. So that's I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but that's an example, right? So that's what I'd be kind of looking at is, where is the club face? Where is it pointing? So for example, if I have this face really, really open at the top, I may throw with my arms to get the face closed, right? So that way I can release the club early to get the club face closed. That may be your solution. So odds are, if you're hitting functional golf shots, odds are you are moving your arms way too fast or things are out of sync compared to, or things that I shouldn't say out of sync because they're in sync for you, right? Because you're hitting functional shots. Right now, you may not be hitting them as consistently as you would like, but you're hitting functional golf shots, right? So if that's happening, then it's in sync it's matching up with what you're doing. It's just not going to be the same sync as a tour player because the things that they're doing in their swing sync up together in a different way. So you have to get the club in the face in a better position. My best advice, without seeing your swing, I would say the 20-minute shallowing fix would be, because the 20-minute shallowing fix gets the club in a better position, gets the face in a better position to allow your body to move better or more instinctually better, more in sync compared to a tour player than maybe what you're doing right now. So that's what I would check out. But if you want to get down to the bottom of it and say, hey, I just want you to tell me what I'm doing, then I'd recommend doing online swing reviews with an instructor. Maybe me, if you'd like to work with me, I'd love to work with you. There should be a link at the top of the page if you want to sign up for that. Just click the grab a spot. If there's no spots available, just click the join my waiting list, and then we'll let you know whenever I open up spots. All right. So we got some more questions here. Really been getting a lot of questions today. Awesome. A lot of times I'll just stand here and nobody asks any questions. So thanks everybody for asking questions. So Dan S says, I have recently discovered I get much better contact with open stance. I'm hitting the ball higher, straighter, and better able to aim than with the draw. I discovered this. Try to hit a draw Also less topping. Any thoughts? Yeah, so if you think about it, when you open the stance, where does it put the ball? Right? So if I'm like this, right, and this is how I normally set up with a square stance, right? But then if I just keep that square to you, and then I open my stance, right? Where's my ball position now? It's more off my back foot, right? So that can make it easier to make ball first contact. Typically, if we're topping, it's because the club's bottoming out before the ball, and then we're missing the ground and then hitting the ball. Sometimes it's because we're just not getting down to the ground, but a lot of times it's because we hang back and then the club works up and hits the top of the ball. That's generally what I see. So if I set up with more of an open stance, that moves the ball more back in my stance and makes it easier for me to hit more down and through it. If I had to guess, that's why, and that's what's going on, but hard to say without seeing your swing. So David H says, any thoughts on the pop putting technique versus classic pendulum? There's lots of ways to do it. Obviously, it works for a lot of golfers, and obviously the kind of the slower, more pendulum type motion works for a lot of golfers as well. So it's just something to play around with. It's mainly what I would look at it is what makes it easiest for you to control the speed, right? For some people, it's a lot easier to control the speed if they hit it with kind of a pop. With some people, it's easier with maybe just like a constant acceleration through the stroke, that sort of thing. So you have to look at what works best for you. What we have to understand is that everything we do in putting, it comes down to really four things, right? So one would be hitting the ball on the right line. So that involves seeing the right line, right? So making sure that what you're seeing is actually straight, right? So if you're lining up and you feel like you're aimed straight, but you're actually aimed to the left, that's a problem, right? So you want to get to where you're actually aimed straight. It's not one of the most important things. As long as you're hitting it on the line that you think you're hitting it on, you're good. You don't necessarily have to be a line straight, but as long as you're hitting on the line that you think that looks straight to you, then you're good to go. The face doesn't necessarily have to be squared up with where you're looking. It just has to, you have to be hitting it on the line that you think is straight, right? If that makes sense. So seeing straight and then hitting it on the line that you believe is straight, right? So that on the line, that's the first piece, right? So the pop stroke versus a pendulum stroke, it's not most likely it's not going to affect the line. It's going to affect more the next piece, which is speed control, right? So hitting the ball on the right line with the right speed. So whatever helps you to control the speed, if that's really the main thing is controlling the speed, that's going to help or hurt, right? So you just have to kind of play around and see what works best for you as far as a pop stroke versus a more of a pendulum or any other kind of stroke. Whatever stroke, however you accelerate or decelerate or whatever, short or long, whether slow or fast, whatever you want to do, it as long as it's the best way for you to control speed, then that's the right thing to do. There's no one right or wrong way. You can look on tour and you can look at elite putters, right? And you will see all kinds of different things, right? It's not like you're going to see all the best players use a pop stroke and the putters that aren't as good on tour use a pendulum stroke or vice versa. It's all finding what works best for you. There's all kinds of different kinds of strokes out there. The third piece would be reading greens, being able to know what line and how hard to hit it, right? So that's a skill that's involved. And then a lot of people don't talk about this, but the fourth piece is really the mental side of it. The best putters in the world feel like they're going to make every single putt, even though you don't. You have to have the understanding of that you're not going to make every single putt, but you still need to feel like you're going to make every single one. So that's kind of the mental side of it. Looking at it that way, understanding that okay, I have an 8-foot putt. The average tour player makes 50% of these. I feel like I'm going to make every single one that I'm standing over, but if I miss it, I'm not going to let it wreck my day. I'm not going to let it get into my head. I'm still going to feel like I'm going to make the next one. So that's kind of, being able to see and visualize things that are going on or going to happen. that kind of goes into the reading part. You can kind of put those together, but that's those are really the main thing. So anything that you change, I had somebody ask me the other day, I switched to the claw grip. So should I do the claw grip instead of the normal grip? And it's about, you have to think about, well, if I switch to a claw grip, what does it actually help? I've played around with different grips, right? And what I found is that, I always go back to the conventional putting grip, right? So overlap with the finger going down the shaft. That's what I always end up going back to. But I've tried to use lead hand low. I've tried to use a claw type grip. I've tried using those, and my speed control got really bad with those. Right, I was maybe able to hit it on a little bit better of a line, but my speed control just got really bad, especially on lag putts. So outside of 15, 20 feet, I was 3-putting a lot with that kind of grip because I just didn't have any feel for the speed. So I just went back to the normal grip because that's what the trade-off wasn't worth it. Now you might be thinking, well, why not use a claw grip for inside 15 feet and then outside 15 feet? You can do that, but I just want to use the same grip all the time and not have to think, okay, what grip am I using? I just want to use the same grip all the time and be consistent with it. So, anyway, without going on a tangent, we'll keep on going here. So Dan S says, sorry, once again, I meant trying to hit a fade. And yes, I was searching with fades. Makes a huge difference. Yeah, so just search the word fade and you'll find lots of videos in there. Hopefully that helps, Dan. So Tom M says, I've been experimenting with backswing to the extent that my hands are higher and behind my right ear, right-handed golfer, which has resulted in 10% more distance with the driver, but it feels less stable and is more inconsistent in ball striking. And videos of my swing with backswing look similar to that of Fred Couples. From that backswing position, I have trouble shallowing out the club, and I'm wondering if I should give up on this or do lots of I think he means reps to get it down. It's really up to you. The more upright you get the swing, the harder it is to shallow it. So you kind of just have to find that happy medium that works for you. If you're hitting the ball farther, 10% farther, right? So, if you're hitting the ball 250 yards and then all of a sudden you're hitting it 275, I think it would be worth it to me anyway. You have to figure out what your, what the appropriate return on investment would be for you. So the investment would be your time to get that down, and maybe the struggles that you would have on the way to being able to do that, right? But you kind of have to figure. You have to make that decision on your own. To me personally, if I was, I'm just saying, just to make the numbers easy to understand, right? If I was hitting the ball 250 and then I found something that allowed me to hit the ball 275 instead of 250, because you're saying 10% more. So 10% of 250 would be 25. So that'd be, now I'm hitting the ball 275. To me, that would be a lot worth it to be able to learn how to hit the ball better from that position, because the trade-off right now is you probably don't hit it quite as good right now when you do that, but you're gaining 25 yards. So that by itself may be already kind of canceling out. And then if you can learn to hit the ball better with that 25 extra yards of distance, or the 10% extra in distance, right? Then you're even in better shape, right? So to me, I think it would be worth it. But if you're someone who's like, I'm not going to practice it, I don't like practicing, I just want to go play, I don't really care if I hit it much farther, right? It really just depends on what your mindset is. So you kind of have to make that determination on your own. But understand, the more upright you are, the more you're like Freddie Couples, very upright, Bubba Watson, the harder it is to shallow out the club. So, you kind of have to find that happy medium that works best for you. All right, so we got 5 minutes left. May have time for one or two more, depending on if we can get them in time. I do have to go right at 4, so make sure to get your questions in. So David A says, how do you think Bernard Longer can do so well with over the top swing? Bernard Longer doesn't swing over the top. I mean, he doesn't. I don't know. Every single player is shallowing out the club, all of them. Now, some of them do it later in the swing. Some of them don't do it a ton, but all players are shallowing out the club. There's no player that comes down steep and cuts across like that. Now, Bernard Longer might hit fades, but he's not coming down steep. Interesting thought I saw that was a change he made. Yeah, I would have to look. I mean, last I saw, he wasn't coming down steep or coming down over the top. One thing we do have to be careful with is listening to what tour players say they're doing, because usually tour players are not doing what they say they're doing. They're doing something. They're describing a feel, right? So what my guess is going on. I haven't looked at Bernard's swing in a while, or heard him talk about changes that he's been making in his swing lately or anything like that. But what I'm guessing is happening is that Bernard probably is feeling like he's coming over the top, and he's not actually coming over the top. That'd be my guess. Hard to say without knowing all the details and stuff. But yeah, so that would be, it's like Jack Nicklaus. He said that he tried to release the club as fast as he could, right? As quickly. He tried to get rid of it as soon as he could. Well, that's not really what was happening. If you look at Jack Nicklaus's swing, right? He's here at impact and he's releasing it out in front. Like it all looks like what we talk about in the Top Speed Golf system. All tour players do, right? But, that's what he thinks he's doing. He thinks he's in his mind, he thinks he's going like this. That's what he thinks and feels like he's doing. But the reality is that he isn't. As I mentioned earlier, golf is a game of adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. So if you're swinging too far under plane, right? If you're dropping your right shoulder and you're swinging too much from the inside, right? Then you may need to feel like you're doing this to get the club to work where you want to. If I had to guess, that's what's happening with Bernard. I would venture to say he's not actually coming over the top or steep. And just to be honest, there's just no tour players that do that, because you can't control the club. If the club is out ahead of your hands, you can't really control it very much. Think of it this way. Would you have more control of a trailer if you were pulling it or if you were backing it up, right? You're going to have way more. You can drive down the interstate pulling a trailer. You can't back an interstate. You can't back a trailer down an interstate going 70, right? That thing's going to, it's going to get off because you can't control it. It's so hard to control. It gets off just a little bit and that thing's going to whip around, right? It's the same thing. If you're not shot, if this club is not behind your hands, if you're not bringing this club around, right, and it's just kicking out in front of your hands, you have no control of it, right? If it's out here, you don't have very much control of it, and it's so hard to be good if you do that. You need to have this club kind of more behind your hands as you're coming through, and you need to have it kicking out toward the ball late. So yeah, that's. I would have to investigate, what's going on with Bernard Longer, but now I wouldn't put it past him. Bernard Longer obviously has been playing awesome golf for a long time. I wouldn't be overly shocked. I'd still be a little bit surprised if he was doing that, but yeah. So David H says, agreed. Expect it was a high early in the backswing, not an actual downswing. Yeah, it's probably just a feel. All right. We'll go ahead and wrap it up right there, right at 4 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here. We won't be here tomorrow. I have a clinic tomorrow, so won't be able to make it for the office hours tomorrow. But I will be here Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great weekend and enjoy your Friday. And I'll talk to you next time.